Good morning and a very warm welcome to our whole Cranleigh Abu Dhabi community, especially to our new parents who may be joining us online for the first time. And as always, a huge thank you to our CCC members, to the Cranleigh Community Committee members. They are growing in number. They've grown in number this year and they continue to be an absolute force of nature, helping us to organise upcoming community events. Be looking out in the newsletter this week, please, for details of the annual community dinner. The winter fair is coming up. They also help deal with lost property, welcoming our new parents, and also funding initiatives such as this, which allow us to reach all of our community. So we're going to be hosting a number of keynote talks, just like this one, online, as we have for the last few years. But we know a lot of you are back at work and you'll be watching this asynchronously after the actual event or in the evening, but welcome anyway. We'll also be hosting a number of face-to-face coffee mornings up at Jumeirah Saadiyat Hotel, so please put them into your calendar and join us up there so that you feel part of our community, because that's really important as well. It's not just for our children to feel part of our school. So I'm not going to say very much today. I am just going to say that our talk today is such a vitally important piece of our puzzle, educating our children as well as our parents and our teachers, our staff. So it is Digital Safety Week. We've put that on the calendar to make sure the emphasis is on keeping all of us safe online. I'm sure every parent feels the same sense of fear and trepidation that I do as a parent when we think about our children's use of the internet. UNICEF acknowledged in 2020 that we'd had an unprecedented rise in screen time, and it's not always easy to find a balance as a family. So our speaker today, Barry Cummings, is an expert in all things cyber. He will tell you more about that. And we're delighted to have him join us to help empower us as parents to support our children navigate the online world. So I'm just going to pop him into the chat. Hi there, Barry.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So thank you so much for joining us today at Cranleigh Abu Dhabi. Now, we had a really good chat earlier this week, so thank you for that as well. And I think it's really important to let our parents know that this is a talk for parents, and you will be touching on some quite hard-hitting issues in this talk today.
Indeed. Yeah, we'll be talking about a few different things, but again, all subjects that we've spoken about at length with other mums and dads in the UAE, and ones that we really feel need to be broached and spoken about, both amongst us parents, our parent community, but also equipping us to talk to our children about these particular subjects as well, and raise that awareness.
Okay, well, like I've said, we are delighted to have you. We are in the background on this talk, myself and Angela from the CCC, and we will be fielding any questions. So please, parents, ask questions. If you want to use the online comment section of Facebook or YouTube, that's fine. If you would like to email me with a question that might be anonymous, my email is there. I didn't put my name, I put my job title and my email address. So please feel free to send me an email and I will keep checking that. And at the end of the talk, we're going to have some time for you to answer any questions that we might have. So I'm going to take myself out of the call right now. I'm going to pop in your PowerPoint so that we can see that. And I'll be back later. So thank you very much for bringing us all of your expertise.
My pleasure. I just want to make sure that the PowerPoint is in there because I can't see it on that screen. So I'm not sure if it's showing in the live feed. Can you see it?
I can see it's been added, but it's not coming up. It did. There we go. Like magic.
Is it there now?
See the light. Yeah, it's the first purple screen. All right, not purple, it's orange.
Okay, and is it just moved? Just so that we make sure it's moved?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're good to go. Thanks. Okay, so again, very good morning. Hopefully on the screen, and we just checked, you can see in the most technologically connected time in history, we're the most disconnected as humans. So what we want to speak about today is this gap, the gap between us as mums and dads and our children in terms of technology, but also what's happening from a wider perspective and how the technology has benefit but we also need to be aware of some of the issues that it presents when we are thinking about how our children utilize it, how we use it. And our purpose as Beat the Cyberbully, is to try and share a lot of the experience that we've gathered over the last, I suppose now it's 12 years that we've been involved in the digital space. So my background and why I'm able to do this is I run a digital marketing agency. So I spend all day, every day working with the platforms that our children are also utilizing. And in 2014, when we started this, it became very apparent that when you take away people's job titles, you end up with mum and dad. And so the meetings I was having with marketing directors and general managers and so forth, we spend about 10 minutes talking about the business, and then the rest of the meeting talking about their children and how the internet, if that's how it works, was potentially an issue. And of course, it is, especially when it comes to the safer of use of it when it comes to our children. So my background is in the digital world. I work with the technology. Beat the Cyberbully is effectively the CSR initiative. We built an app platform, so a technology platform to share some of this information as well. And I've had around 55 online businesses since 2008. So I'm very, very familiar with a lot of these platforms, the lingo, the situations that unfold in the online space. And what I want to do is take that information and share it with other mums and dads. I'm a dad of 2 young boys. It was real before they came along, and now it's so real. So I do understand the frustrations, the fear, and also how we can maybe put some things in place to mitigate some of the issues that are showing themselves for some of us, or that are potentially a little bit further down the road if we've got younger ones. Speaking of roads, this is what we're going to focus on today. We're going to talk about the digital landscape. We're going to look at the generational divide and how that actually impacts the entire situation. We're going to focus on the threats, because I really feel that we need to be aware as mum and dad of what the threats are, so that we can evaluate how we're going to talk about them with our children, and also how we are going to mitigate some of the risk from that. That will involve the parental controls that we talk about, a little bit of why we have no choice but to act right now, and focus on the continued education when it comes to the next steps, if you like. So children and young people use social media platforms for different reasons, and depending on the age of your child, there'll be a certain air quotes requirement to get a phone, to get an iPad, to be on certain platforms. And one of the things that we want to really have open discussions with our children about is the idea of what they see in the online space, not necessarily being a true reflection of real life. And it's become harder and harder for us to do this, because there are now YouTubers, influencers, people making money from being professional YouTubers, professional esports and gamers. And so our children are looking at these things and, yeah, well, I want to do that. And long gone are the times where we would be able to legitimately turn around and say, no, we can't do that. That's not a real job, because now people are proving that there are real jobs out there in these fields. And so we have to adapt our approach to this. But one thing that we can definitely do is we can talk to our children about what they see in the online space, not being necessarily a true reflection of real life, as it were. And I have a video that I'm going to show, and hopefully that it will come through and you'll be able to see and hear it. And if not, then please somebody do let me know, and I can explain a little bit more about it. But let's have a look at it, because I'd like to discuss what we see in that particular video. So as you can see there, that video comes from webwise.ie, and I think it's a really useful one for us to have watched. And I do show it to secondary school students and also to primary as well, just because I feel it's so important for them to understand that what they see is a curated view of people's lives. I've spoken to so many young people who aspire to be influencers and online famous. And what I'd like us to talk about is the full picture of what that actually means to them when they think, well, I just want to make money posting pictures on Snapchat or Instagram or YouTube and have 1 million subscribers. And what they see and what they aspire to is not a true reflection of what went into it. And so we're seeing a bit of a trend now where more and more of these so-called influencers are touching on other parts of their lives, just not the good sunshine rainbow bits, but some of the struggles that they go through to get to that point. And that's what we want to start to really facilitate in terms of communication, is a true picture of what goes on in the digital space. But in order for that to happen, we as mum and dad need to be informed. We need to be aware. So I'd like to start with a little game, if you like, just to try and emphasize the point when it comes to us as mum and dad and the gap between what we know and what our children know. So if there is anybody watching live on this and they would like to participate, in the comment section, if you can pop in there the names of any of these icons, app icons that you recognize, put them in the comment section just to see who knows what, if you recognize any of them. If you don't recognize any of them, just put, I have got no idea, and that's fine as well. You can put that into the comment section there so that we can establish a baseline, if you like, in terms of where we are in terms of knowledge. And then we'll have a little chat about the reality of the digital landscape and where our children are spending time. So hopefully we have a couple of people. I'll just check the comments there in terms of the ability to see them there, and let's see if there are. Okay, no, none of them found. Oh, just seeing that there now. Sound isn't working. Okay, the sound isn't working on the video. Okay, there's a couple more videos, and we'll see if we can fix that as we move forwards. So yeah, no idea. None. Okay, a resounding none. Fair enough. Let's go back into the slideshow there so we can do that. Okay. So it's not designed to make you feel bad. It's great that you're very honest from that side of things. What we see on the screen here, the yellow one on the left-hand side is an app called Yubo. Then you've got Telenym. Then we've got Yik Yak. Discord at the bottom in the center. Then at the top center, Omegle. Then we've got FreeVPN, Hippo, and then one called BitLife. And the reason I put this up here is to really try and emphasize the fact that we as mum and dad sometimes really don't understand where our children are spending time or what applications are available to them. We all heard about Facebook and Instagram, and we know about TikTok and Snapchat and so forth, but we maybe don't know about some of the other ones. And our children know that we don't know, and that's where they're spending some time. And so if we are engaged and we are looking at what they're doing, we're looking at a curated view for us as mum and dad of what's going on. So Yubo we have on here as unfortunately has the dubious title of Tinder for Teens. So if you're familiar with what Tinder is, it's a dating application for adults. And Yubo has been dubbed the Tinder for Teens. And so I think you can understand the potential worry with that one. And again, a lot of young people utilizing. Then you've got Telenym. Telenym here again is a secret sharing app, if you like. It's encouraging anonymous chat, if you like, within communities. And it's encouraging our children to also create anonymous profiles, and they say and share things about people that they know on there. So again, it's encouraging to undertake some behaviors that we perhaps wouldn't want them to. I'm going to come back to Yik Yak in a minute. Discord is one, again, that we would hope more and more parents are aware of, because whenever I'm in school, I'm talking to the students and I put this icon up, all of the students, regardless of age, start chatting. You say, oh, yeah, with Discord. And I ask them if they recognize it. And they say, yep, we know this. They're spending time on there. And then when I speak to the parents, they said, no idea, never seen that before. Our children are spending time on there. It's a place for them to hang out. It's a streaming platform. It's where they go to get online and share gaming experiences, because you can jump on servers over there and share that. But unless it's locked private, you can also be sharing a server with complete strangers. And those, whilst they might just be playing their favorite game, they can also be people leveraging those platforms from a predatory perspective, especially if our children don't know the people they're playing with. So again, to denies the technology, it's to make us aware that Discord is a brilliant platform, in my opinion. They don't only just share and communicate around gaming. You can learn a musical instrument on a Discord server. You can learn a language on a Discord server with other people in there. They can all have their own private server where only their friends that they actually know in real life can all jump online, and they can play or they can do whatever it is. So there's benefits, but again, it's for us to understand what they are so that we don't just do this blanket, it's not allowed. We get a better understanding of it so that we can help them set it up safely and utilize it. And so we get a bit of accord in our household because they want to use the technology. And sometimes we as mum and dad just give a blanket no because we're not aware of what is actually happening on there and how it could be beneficial. At the top there, Omegle, that's one that we want to be worried about. And again, it's to help you understand that if you see these icons on your children's devices, that it may be some red flag for a chat, because if they're on something like Omegle, it's a video chat app with strangers. So you go on there and then just links up random video cameras around the world and they start talking to people. And I'm sure you can imagine that sometimes those cameras are showing things that we wouldn't want our children seeing. And also, why are they going online to talk to strangers? And we'll get into that a little bit later on. Free VPN, this is one that's on there because a lot of children are using VPNs. And some of us are using VPNs ourselves at home because we want to be able to access TV programs from home, wherever our home country is. But we also need to understand that by implementing VPNs or allowing our children to implement them on their devices, they can bypass a lot of the precautionary measures that, for example, at school, the networks are locked down. As long as the children are utilizing the network. But if they stick a VPN on, then that bypasses a lot of those security settings. So it's about us understanding that and having that conversation with our children as to why it's not actually allowed when it comes to their devices. Hippo, or another one called Monkey, again, these are anonymous chat apps where you go online and talk to random strangers, but not just talk to them, you video chat with them so they see you. Again, there's some scenarios unfolding on these platforms that we don't want our children involved with, and we'll talk at length about that further down the line. And the last one there on the right hand side is one called BitLife. That one is a simulation, if you like. So it's not graphic in nature, but it's introducing subject matter to our children that perhaps we would not want them introduced to, or at least we would like to, as mum and dad, talk about them and frame them the way that we would like to from how we are raising our children, rather than from a game. Because in this is you take control of avatar and then you make decisions on behalf of that avatar. And so it's you may have heard of Second Life or something like that. You're managing your character and you make decisions. So they wake up early, they go to the gym, they eat a healthy breakfast, they go to work, they go to school. You can make all of those decisions, or they can wake up, they can go onto the street, they can kill somebody, they could drug, they can engage in prostitution. So all of these kind of acts are talked about and your character goes through them. It's not graphically shown, but as I said, these are perhaps topics that we would prefer, depending on the age of our child, they were not exposed to, or that we are able to frame them the way that we would like to. When I put this, one of the sessions that I've run previously was with a number of educators and parents in a room. It was an event. It was held at a school. And I asked everybody in that room, there's about 40 people, and said, does anybody recognize this? And nobody did, except for one hand that went up. And it was the hand of a 12-year-old at the back of the room. Said, yeah, I play on that. Couldn't have emphasized my point better, but his hand shot up. He recognized it. He was on there, and he was the only student in the room, and he was there to help us grown-ups and adults navigate from one room to the other when we changed sessions, etc. And again, I promise you, it wasn't a plant, but it couldn't have emphasized my point better, that he knew it, was actively in it, and everybody else in that room, no clue at all. Yik Yak, I wanted to talk about in particular this because it was one of the pioneers of anonymous chat apps back in 2013. And when they went into the app stores, they said it's designed for college students, and that's why it was not such a bad thing. But of course, no age verification, so younger children were on there. It just became this hotbed of cyberbullying, harassment, and because you could be anonymous on there. Young people were jumping in there and saying whatever they liked. And it became a real problem to the point that in the United States, it got banned from schools by geofencing. So as you walk through the school gates, you couldn't access that, which was great whilst they were at school. But of course, as soon as they walked outside of the school gates, it was available again. But actually, that action helped to get it banned in 2017, and it was gone. But just earlier this year, they relaunched exactly the same as they were before. So anonymous chat app, it's in this at the moment only on Apple, but it won't be long until it's available everywhere again. So as mum and dad, we want to be aware of this in case we see it on our children's devices. So at least we recognize it and say, okay, that's something that we need to talk about when it comes to this particular application, if you like. Coming to Discord again, it's as we said before, Skype for gamers is kind of how it's described. You can be on a private server, there's chat lobbies, there's VoIP chat systems, so they can talk for free if they've got access to the internet. You create your own server, you join someone else's, but it does have a 17 plus rating on Apple. So this is where we get into this territory. It very recently changed from 13 because Apple asked them to. And it's an interesting one, and it's because of some of the content that's available on there. We don't want to necessarily demonize the technology, because all Discord is servers. And if you set up your server with privacy settings and allow only people you know, then there isn't really an issue, other than if you don't want your children spending too much time on a screen. We also have to kind of get our head around that the last 2 years of our lives have forced them into this world even more so. And the world that we're preparing them for is a digital one that is based on screens. So we need to find a balance within our family units. There's around 250 million users globally, and that's going up. But this is something that I also share with the young people when I'm talking to them, is that there's a lot of issues on the platform. So you've got 92.5 million people who have been harassed on Discord, and 30 million that have actually been victims of cybercrime, either had some information taken from them or fraud and so forth. One of the reasons that it has to be increased to a 17 age rating was because of this thing, NSFW, not suitable for work, is the label. And it's servers that have content on them that are not suitable for watching at work. If you're an adult, they're definitely not suitable for children and so forth. So there is a lot of pornography on there, sexual content. You're supposed to label those servers if you set them up. And unfortunately, again, the human condition, some people think it's hilarious to have inappropriate content on a server and not label it. So then our children are looking around, they even label them with attractive names, that it might be a gaming platform that our children were playing, and then they go and they see some of this stuff that they're not ready to see, or it piques their interest, and then they go searching for more of it. So again, awareness is key when it comes to this. We want to understand what's going on there. And we want to understand how the system works, because then we can make an informed decision as to whether or not our children are going to be allowed to use it. If they are going to use it, there's a great functionality in there. It's called Keep Me Safe. We can turn it on, and we can actually protect our children's use of this particular technology. We lock down the servers, they start their own server, verify everybody on it so we know that it's friends from school and so forth, and they can explore their interests in music, language, instruments, NFTs, whatever it is. They can do it as safely as possible, because it's been set up the right way by us as mum and dad to help them leverage this. And this is also very important, as with all the platforms. If there is unwanted attention, inappropriate content that our children are experiencing, they block it and then they report it on the platform itself. The platforms are trying. Firmly believe that the platforms could be doing a lot more when it comes to this inappropriate content. We've got literally hundreds of millions of users. There are not hundreds of millions of employees on these organizations, and so going through a lot of this is a manual process that they take time to get to, which is extremely frustrating if you're the victim of something inappropriate. But it's also the reality of the world that we live in now, and unfortunately we have to kind of get to grips with that a little bit when it comes to how we talk to our children about it. So there we go. We also, when it comes to our children, we have to learn a new language. We have to learn emoji. Some of us may well have started implementing some of this into our speak already. We use the happy faces or the thumbs up and all of this kind of stuff. But when it comes to emoji, we might also get to a situation where we look at our children's devices, we look into a WhatsApp or an instant messaging or just on one of their gaming platforms, and we look at the chat and think, I guess they just maybe sat on the keyboard or sat on their phone or did something with all the keys at once, because that makes absolutely no sense. There's no words there, just images, and you think, okay, nothing to worry about. But we, again, need to be aware as mum and dad that they are, in some cases, communicating very specific messages with each other using these very emojis because they have alternative meanings. So again, probably no surprise, but these are some of the meanings of some of the emojis that are out. There is an upward trend of sexual conversations between our young people at a younger and younger age. They are exposed to some of this information and this content on the internet, on the wider internet, and it's purveying into their day-to-day lives. So there are alternative meanings to these emojis that we need to be aware of, so that, again, if we see them, we can make a judgment call and say, okay, there's definitely something going on here that we need to talk about. This is why it's a bit of an issue, because depending on when we were born as mum and dad, impacts our relationship with the technology, and it impacts our approach to how our children are to use this technology. So we sometimes have some unrealistic expectations of our children, and this is, again, from our perspective. We do a lot of work with clinical psychologists, and this is where this information has come from, in terms of where the physiological development of our children is impacting their ability to live up to our expectations when it comes to the digital platforms. So this is where we have to get a little bit technical, and why you can see an image of the brain on there is because it's very important for us to understand before we get into why the generational differences make a big impact on how our approach to raising our children is set. We need to understand that when we're talking to our children about this and we are trying to get them understand, those of you with younger children will be very familiar with this, that in your mind, you're talking about something that just makes complete sense. And you're talking to your 4, 5, 6-year-old and thinking, why are you not understanding this? We've been through this before. You're not getting it. And this is because they're not physiologically capable of understanding that. Now, the bit that we need to focus on for our tweens and teens is the prefrontal cortex. And this is the part of the brain that is not fully developed until we are 25 years old. And it's also the part of the brain that deals with planning and reasoning. So it's why our children have no issues with just doing stuff and getting on with it, and seeking out, in some cases, high risk situations. It's the physiological state. And then we have to also look at the amygdala, which is the emotional core for passion, impulse, fear, and aggression. We as adults rely less on this and use our prefrontal cortex more. Our teen tween are more impulsive. They don't fear anything. They think they're untouchable, and they believe that they are. To a certain extent, we want to also encourage this feeling within our children, that they can achieve whatever they want that they put their mind to. But we also have to try and balance this out with sometimes when they're doing specific tasks, i.e., working in the digital space, why they are so drawn into this world, why it's so attractive to spend 8 to 10 hours on, Fortnite or Minecraft or just on Instagram or Snapchat. And it's because it's an attractive model, and it's because they're physiologically not developed to understand that spending that much time in the online space is not necessarily good for them, and that they see no problem with it. It's also why they have, in some cases, no problem with sharing everything about themselves in the digital space, which again can throw up its own issues. On the slide, you can see a breakdown here of where we might fall in terms of our birthdays and therefore our relationship with the technology. So we have baby boomers, 1946 to 1964, and they have an acquired relationship with the technology. A very different world that they grew up in. We've got Generation X that have an assimilated relationship with the technology, as with Zennials, and this is a very small age gap, if you like. It's 1977 to 1983. And whilst we have an assimilated relationship with technology, we didn't have it necessarily at the younger age growing up. It came into our lives either in teens or late teens, or perhaps at university. Then we have our millennials, where technology is integral. And then we've got Generation Z, who are digital natives. And we all see the technology slightly differently based on when we were born. And this is why in some cases we are almost talking a completely different language to our children, because we think that we are communicating something and they are not understanding what we are saying. One example of this is when we, and again I include myself in this, I fall into the Xennial banner here. My relationship with technology did occur until late teens, going to university. But I have to catch myself if you've ever experienced this, if you start a sentence with, when I was younger, we didn't have, this didn't, our children turn off. Because for a lot of our children, they have no reference point of the world that we grew up in. They were born into a digital world of screens everywhere. Internet was there, social media was there, always on media, Netflix, Spotify, etc. So when we say, well, we never used to have this, and we used to go out from when the sun went down, and when the street light came on, was our notification to go home. They're like, so what? So what? That is a lovely nostalgic view down memory lane. It has nothing to do with their lives today. And so we need to adapt how we are talking to them about these particular subjects. There is some light at the end of the tunnel, because the next generation coming through, they're what's known as Generation Alpha, those born between 2010 and 2025. It will be the largest generation in the history of the world. It's the first generation to be fully immersed in technology for their entire lives, and they will be the most educated generation of all time. I suppose we can take heart that if you have children in this particular age bracket, that their relationship with the technology is going to be very different to those that have come before them. This is the generation that's actually going to bend the technology to their use rather than the other way around, which is the issues that we are seeing right now. We still have to put things in place and worry a little bit, but not as much, because we are definitely going to get this scenario where our Generation Alphas are going to turn around and say, don't worry, Dad, we've got this. We understand what's happening, know the risks, and we're actually going to use the technology for betterment of our lives, as opposed to wasting time or getting into trouble on these platforms. Going back to Generation Z, which is where we're seeing a lot of these issues, they have a different outlook, which is actually a good thing. It's something that we kind of have them as the guinea pigs, if you like. They're the guinea pig generation, because they are growing up in a world where mum and dad are also not 100% sure about what's going on when it comes to digital. We're learning, they're learning. And so everybody's pushing their boundaries. And in some cases, our children don't know where the boundaries are, because we as mum and dad have not set those boundaries. They have a very different outlook on things like sexual orientation, diverse ethnicities, and economic obstacles. These are topics that are widely spoken about without any issues, which were previously seen as taboo, if you like, in our day and age of growing up. But they have a very different view on the world. But it's also it's interesting to see that they have also identified as being one of the loneliest generations because of this technology, that whilst they are connected in, they feel completely disconnected from parents, from the world at large. The small silver lining here, if you like, is that they are also more prone to talking about the fact that there's something wrong, and that they are able to seek help because there's something going on. But in some cases, they're not sure where to go to seek that help. And this is where we have to step in as mum and dad. Not least of which, because of this relationship now with mental wellness or mental illness and the digital space. And there's a lot of evidence they're completely intertwined, and that the suicide rates of young people are going up in direct correlation to the introduction of the first iPhone and exposure to social media. So we have to be aware of this so that we can make the necessary adjustments in our own homes, so that we can start to identify some of these signals, if you like, from our children, that it's not just them acting out as teenagers or tweens. It's something else that's affecting them, and it's more than likely it's something to do with the digital space where they spend time, and it could be that we're just unaware of where they're spending time, that our children don't go online. We haven't given them a phone, and yet they're still finding a way to go online. So again, it becomes a part of our responsibility as mum and dad to understand this from a higher level, to be able to then communicate it. At the end of the day, we have a common goal, whether it's me as Beat the Cyberbully or as a dad, the school as parents. We're trying to develop our children's awareness of the digital risks and the opportunities, and empower them to actually make better decisions in the online space and have critical digital skills to facilitate safer engagement. At the end of the day, we have to give them the opportunity to use these tools, because the digital world is the one we've chosen to bring them into. They need to understand the technology, use the technology. Those of them that are going into the university ages and on their educational journey, more and more of this hybrid learning is happening. More and more people learning from YouTube tutorials. The society is shifting, and so we have to make sure that we are, as much as possible, preparing our children for this digital world, so that they can get out there and make the difference we know that they can make. And so in order to do that, we have to create safer online spaces. We, as mum and dad, have to help create safe online spaces. There's a lot of onus as well on the platforms to do this, and a bit like a huge oil tanker, it takes them a while to change direction. But we're seeing some improvement from that side of things. But whilst we're waiting for them to adjust their course, we can take some of that responsibility as mum and dad to try and help provide safer online spaces for our children. How do we do that? Well, we do that by identifying some of the specific risks out there that our children are facing. Okay. What are those risks? So these are some of the specific risks that our children and young people are facing at the moment. There's reputation. This is really important for our teens moving into the latter years of secondary. Everything they do in the online space becomes a part of what we call their digital tattoo. And talk at length with senior school students about this, that every single thing they do becomes part of how they will be judged online. Are they happy with everything that's going out there? The things that they think disappear after 10 seconds on Snapchat or as a one-off message on WhatsApp and it's gone, for them to really understand that it never truly disappears. And when you post it, you lose control, and it can take on its own life, and you cannot control where that pops up. And the last thing that they want is for one of those inappropriate images to pop up in the interview process for university application, or that they get rejected from university because the recruitment officer goes online and Googles them and up pops these inappropriate comments and the appropriate images, and their application goes straight in the bin. And again, I talk at length with students about this. Sexual images and videos, we have a real problem with this in the UAE. This is not just something that happens in the US and in the UK or Australia or Europe. It's happening here in the UAE. I know this for a fact because I have conversations with people at schools who ask me what they should do when they have sent a nude to somebody that they know they shouldn't have. Sending those inappropriate images and videos ends up in scenarios like grooming and extortion, which you can see on there. That they've sent an image to somebody who they thought was also another 14-year-old child. Turns out it wasn't. And now that they've sent that nude, they're either being blackmailed or extorted for more nudes, or that they're being asked for money. Otherwise, that predator will share that information with their family, post it into the school networks, etc., etc. So we have a real issue with that going on that we need to address and talk about openly. COVID has meant cyber crime has gone through the roof because we're all spending more time online and not paying attention all the time. So we want to think about this when it comes to our children, because they are targeted by criminals because they're playing on their online games. They're fully immersed in this. There's a chat function in the shared server. They're not paying attention. They're in their game, and then they see something that somebody posts in there and says, "Oh, you can upgrade your character for $1 instead of $10." Without even a second's thought, they're going to click on that. And that's potentially opening up malware, installing malware that's then either stealing passwords or monitoring keystrokes, or it just destroys their device. And so we want to try and help them understand dangers of that. Fake profiles and identity theft. Our children share so much information about themselves. They can effectively draw a target on their back because there's so much information about. It's very easy to be them. The example I use for this a lot of the time is even when they post during the summer or holidays, going on a family holiday for 4 weeks, can't wait. And you think, what's the harm in that? Well, by posting that online and taking all the other information that they've posted over the course of their, the last couple of months, it doesn't take much to determine where you live, where that house is. If that house is empty for a month, and if I was to go and have a look at what was available to me, I could go and have a look. And so we have to put all of these pieces together. Peer abuse and cyberbullying is obviously a risk. A lot of cyberbullying happens not from strangers, but by people they know within their network, maybe pretending to be somebody else, but it's someone that they know. There's a real issue with pornography on the ground here in the UAE. You might think that that's not the case, but it really is. We have to be aware of some of the platforms that have these kind of issues, and grooming, extortion, we've touched upon there, and then things like the dark web. We need to be aware of the dark web as mum and dad, because I've had conversations with 12-year-olds in the UAE who are actively on the dark web doing things. It's not a place that we want them spending time. If you don't know much about it, then you can Google it and increase your level of understanding. We should do that, because what we know as the internet of Google and Facebook and Instagram and all that, it's about 30% of the internet. The other 70% is the dark web, and nobody's watching in the dark web. And on the dark web, you can purchase laptops, you can purchase microphones, you can purchase phones, you can purchase recipes for how to make a bomb, you can purchase guns, you can purchase drugs, you can purchase people. And these kind of things are happening in the dark web, and it's not somewhere that we want our child spending time. And again, I spoke to teens and tweens on the ground here in the UAE who know how to access it. I spoke to a 12-year-old who was doing something very admirable on there. He was tracking a cyberbully because his friend was being cyberbullied, and this young man was tracking this cyberbully through his IP addresses, even though he was spoofing these IP addresses and trying to throw people off his scent. And this young man was using the dark web to try and find out where this guy was, or girl. And he was telling me about how he was tracking him through various different countries and lost the trail in Switzerland. So again, an admirable use, but I would not want my 12-year-old in the dark web. And so again, that deserves its own session, but it's something that we need to be aware of as mum and dad. I've got another video here, and I'm not entirely sure how the sound is going to come through, but actually it's more of a visual anyway, so we'll let it play, and then we'll just explain it a little bit further. Because on this slide, you can see fake profiles and identity theft is emboldened, and it's because of the way that our children look at the internet and how they share on the internet. They're not really protecting the most valuable thing that they have, or the most valuable asset in the world right now. And when I ask students what that is, they throw out Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies or gold or silver. But actually, the most valuable asset is data. I mean, it's your data. It's why Facebook and Instagram and Meta, if you like, Google are multi-billion-dollar companies, because they have all our data. And so when our children are posting continuously through these platforms, they're putting a lot of their data out there. It makes it easy for people to target them. So just watch this quick video and have a discussion about it after. So these videos come from Europol, but they emphasize a very real issue, which is that grooming and extortion are a multi-billion-dollar business. There are people whose job it is to come into their quotes office, sit down, and find young people to target, to extort from. The more information that our children put out there about who they are, the easier it is to establish a relationship with them, have things in common with them, effectively groom them, so that our 12, 14-year-old thinks that they're talking to another 14-year-old who gets them, because mum and dad doesn't get them, and it's not fair. They just want to ban me from this. But this other 14-year-old is like, yeah, fully, my parents are the same. I'm going through the same stuff. And they establish this relationship. And then, as you see in the video, these scenarios unfold, because once the trust is there, once a request for an inappropriate image comes through, our children are thinking, well, I can trust this person, right? They're my friend. And then as soon as it comes through, the demands for more of that kind of content or imagery or money comes through. And again, this is not theoretical. I've had a number of conversations, but one that comes to mind was a 16-year-old girl who, after my session at school, came up to me and asked me what she should do, because 3 weeks ago she shared an inappropriate image. She was now being asked for money and more images, and for 3 weeks she had been struggling with this herself because she didn't know what to do. She's asking me, should I tell my parents? Should I tell school? What do I do? And again, I'm very grateful that she was asking me this question, at least as an outlet. But at the same time, I'm also thinking, why is she asking me this question? Effectively, a stranger coming into school. And for 3 weeks, her 16-year-old brain is trying to get to grips with this, as well as hiding it from everybody and going to school and getting on with her life. It's such a horrible situation for them to be in. And that's why we have to redress this balance. Chat rooms we need to be aware of. So aside from just this idea of sharing inappropriate content and grooming and extortion, this is actually a platform where this kind of thing happens, because on here you can see it says, under the image on screen is, why do people use online chat rooms? People use them to make and share our experiences with total random strangers, feel secure interacting online from our homes, and sometimes just boredom. It's appealing. It's appealing to a teen. You can see the types of topics that are available. You can literally go online, put Chat Avenue into Google, and then you can pick any of these particular areas to go and spend some time as a young person, or as anybody really. And again, we need to be aware of these so that we can have these conversations, so that our children understand that we know a bit about the platforms and the world that they're spending time in. Further risks. We touched on it previously, but pornography is a really, really big problem, especially for young men in this country and globally. A lot of content is becoming more sexual in nature on the general platforms. People say, well, of course, I'm not going to allow my child to have access to things like YouPorn or Pornhub because I've heard of those and it's not appropriate for a 12, 13-year-old to have access to that. But you might not know that one of the most pervasive channels for pornography in the UAE is Twitter. And you think, that can't be right. Twitter is the platform that governments use to communicate on. It's the platform that the news channels broadcast on. It's the more official, professional platform, if you like. You've got to be very careful not to stumble across sexual imagery on Twitter when you are looking at particular content. And that app is freely available and not on any banned list anywhere. So again, awareness is key, that where our children are spending time could be kind of a greater issue. There's research and data coming out of the East, Japan and some places like that are showing that young men are now preferring to engage with pornography than actually with a relationship with a real person, with a girl. And so this has impacts from a much larger level, and it's also impacting how young people are viewing what a healthy relationship actually looks like, because it's being influenced by what they've seen on a screen. So we have to be aware of these things, because it's now got its own definition. What we're seeing happening is what's called technology assisted harm. It's happening to our children on these platforms, and in some cases we're not fully aware of what's going on. Just to emphasize it, there is a video. I'm going to show it. Again, I'm not entirely sure about the sound element on this going on, but let me press play and see how we go with this. So that's from CEOP, a great resource from the UK. you can go and have a look for that video online. There is a soundtrack where the words you could see there are actually spoken, so it has that impact. But See Up and Think You Know are great resources to go to from a parental perspective to go and have a look for help and support. But what else can we do as parents? Well, one of the main things that we can do as mum and dad is to think about modeling appropriate technology usage. We have to think about how we use our technology in front of our children. So it's not just about how often we're on there, because that's almost becoming a moot point, but we still have to strive for balance. Try to be in the situations where we are with our children and have a phone in our hand, because of course, when they get to a certain age, they're going to want to do the same thing. And us telling them to get off the phone when we are constantly on the phone, it's hypocritical. And I understand this. I run a digital business, and so I need, in air quotes, the tools to do my business. But I also need to identify and allocate specific time to my children and to us as a family unit where the technology is not in my hand or I'm not focusing on it. And it's not easy. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but we have to start to try to do something about this. So we have to think about how often we're using the technology in front of our children. We also have to think about how we engage on some of these platforms, because some of the most vitriolic, rude comments seen are in parent WhatsApp groups. Parents of children in the same year at school really going after each other and insulting each other, insulting their religion, insulting their belief system in these particular groups. And we have to think about that, because you say, well, yeah, okay, that does happen, but how's my child going to see that? Well, depending on the age of your child, and there are situations where you end up giving them your phone, maybe that they need to do something, they need to speak to somebody, or a call comes in on your phone for them and you give it to them, and then they hang up, and then of course they're curious creatures and they go off looking at what else is on there, and they start to see these words and they see how you're communicating in the online space and they mirror it. So we need to be wary there. We also need to look at how we can cultivate an open lines of communication. That's the premise of this session, is to try and provide content for opening that door for communication. The only way that we can broach this issue of cyberbullying, prevention of cyber safety, of online misuse, is by talking to our children about what is going on and why we are doing certain things in our household. So we have to try and find ways to talk to our children in a language that they understand and can relate to. This comes back to the generational differences, is that we have to stop talking about when we were younger. We have to start talking about today. And in some cases, it means that whilst we may have absolutely no interest whatsoever in Minecraft or Roblox or PUBG or Fortnite or Call of Duty, if our children are interested in this, we have to start to take an interest. Because if we start asking them questions about those subjects, which they're massively interested in, we get an opportunity to talk to them. And so we want to find ways to open those communication channels and keep them open, so that we provide not just a safer online space, but we provide them with a safe space offline to talk about what's going on in their digital lives. Something that I've taken from our clinical psychologist, we often talk to our children whenever we can, because it's a very, very busy day. And one of the times that we often ask them is the car, when we pick them up from school, how was your day? And we get that answer that we're like so very familiar with. How was your day at school? Yeah, fine. End of communication. They're fine. We think, okay, they're fine. They're okay. On to football practice, gymnastics, ballet, swimming, wherever it is that they've got to get to before we get home for dinner. What FINE stands for is feelings inside not expressed. And on the car ride home from school, our children haven't had a chance to process what happened at school yet. And so when we ask them about it, they are still processing it, and they roll out the answer as fine, because they just want to be left alone to process it. So we have to try and find another way to have some time and hold some space for them where we can have that conversation. And I know we're all extremely busy. I know that time is a premium, but again, from my perspective, we have to find a way to make the time for this to happen. What else can we do? Well, we can leverage the technology that is available to us. Parental software is a part of the comprehensive approach to online safety, but I also have to really emphasize that it is a part of the solution. It's not the entire solution. I've had this conversation, as I said, I've put this on my home Wi-Fi on the mobile devices, we're safe. That's not true. We are safer because there is something monitoring for us, but we also need to ensure that we are still having open conversations, that we're still talking to them about what's going on, that we are still pushing our own understanding of what's happening in the digital space so that we can have these conversations. But one or two examples, we should at the very, very bare minimum have a family account set up, whether you're an Android user or an iPhone, iOS user, it's available on both platforms, that you as the parent set up the parent account and then your children's devices come under you. It stops them from downloading things without your permission. You can PIN code protect it. You can password protect it. So again, they can't just download whatever they want. You also prevent the scenario unfolded where suddenly you get a bill from your credit card that says you spent 3,500 dirhams on the Apple iStore, and you think, I definitely didn't, and yet our child has somehow managed to do that because they're not under our family sharing. They've got their own access. We haven't been monitoring, and they've been buying in-app, upgrades, currency, anything from that side of things. So family sharing is a bare minimum, if you like, in terms of setup. When it comes to our home networks, the Gryphon router is the pinnacle of routers, if you like, or routers. It's widely acknowledged as the market leader when it comes to internet security. So it not only provides you with your Wi-Fi access, you can build in all of the parental controls on the router so that when our children are connected to that particular Wi-Fi, there are already security measures in place that they cannot bypass. It does require the purchase of a physical router. So if you're in the process of redoing or thinking about this is a good time to do it. It can be ordered on Amazon, so it is available here in the UAE as well, coming from the United States. If you don't want to buy an entirely new router, then we can look at something like Meet Circle or Circle Plus with Disney. It's the option for those that are not necessarily looking to purchase a completely new setup, because you can plug this into your existing setup. And what it does, it allows you to, again, configure your home networks for how you would like your children to be able to access the internet, specific times when it goes off, specific apps, websites, etc., of where and what they can't do. Also to note, just quickly, the Gryphon router, whilst that is set up for your home network, they also have a mobile offering so that you can lock down the mobile devices of our children and ourselves from that side of things. Another one added to the toolbox is something called SpinSafe browser. It's an internet browser, but things like Google and Firefox and Edge, they don't come out of the box on your mobile devices or laptops and so forth with any safety in place. And so this one does. It comes from an organization that also created parental control softwares called Use Boomerang. But this is a way that they can search the internet, and you have peace of mind that there are already certain things that are banned and you can't access. And then as things crop up, you can relay them to the guys that run this, and they will add them to the blocked list, as it were, so that it already has an extensive block list, but you can also tailor it to whatever it is that needs to happen for your family unit. Then we've got this one called Bark, and again, I put this in here for your awareness, because I highly recommend you go and check out bark.us as a website. It is the best parental control software out there, but, and there's a big but, it isn't available in the UAE. So you say, why bother mentioning it, Barry? Well, I advise you to go and check it out, because by looking at it, you can see the kind of functionality that you would want to have in your parental control software. You can see on the right-hand side there, it's a snapshot from their website. 5.9 million children covered, 550,000 severe self-harm situations detected, and 2.6 million severe bullying situations detected. The software is looking at certain things, their images, where they're searching, messages that are coming in, their search history, their social media channels, and alerts you when there is a violation of the rules that you've set up. So again, this is really important for our own education as mum and dad. Then on the ground here in the UAE is a software called Nishint, which does a lot of what Bark does, and it's supported on the ground here and is available to us now, as it were, as opposed to the Bark offering. So again, we talk about various different tools because I know everybody's doing it differently, and we have to take whatever you can from this session and implement it into the framework of your family unit and how you're raising your children. Why do we have to do this? Well, it's a very good question, and unfortunately it touches then upon a really sad topic. The reason why I do this and why I firmly believe we as mum and dad need to up our game and get on top of this is because there's far too many examples of young people who are no longer with us as a result of taking their own life because of something that happened in the online space. We've got Mia on the left-hand side, Janice at the top, Ronan, Breck, Molly, Dolly at the bottom in the hat, and then Channing on the right-hand side. And they range from 14 years old to 19 years old when they decided that what they were experiencing in the online space was too much. There was nobody to talk to. They didn't know what to do. And they figured that the only option was to end their own life, which is a major driver for me doing this, because that's unacceptable for me in this world for young people to feel this way. And unfortunately, we're seeing this going up and up, this feeling that they're having. There's nearly 800,000 people die by suicide in the world each year, one every 40 seconds, and it's taking 15 to 24-year-olds. And so that's young. It's the second leading cause of death in the world, second only to accidental death. And so this is why we have no choice but to really our level of understanding up and see how we can work together as a family unit, as a society, to protect our children in the online space. How do we do that to support our children in the digital world? Well, there's a couple of things. And one of the main things we can look at is this idea of digital hygiene. It's where we can start to look at ourselves as mum and dad and then talk to our children about their digital hygiene. Something as simple as passwords is a good place to start. We've talked about locking down our networks and our Wi-Fi and our mobile devices, but we also need to think about certain actionable elements. And this is why we sort of focus on this. Passwords is something really easy that we can focus on from the beginning. You can see on the screen, it says 65% of people use the same password for multiple accounts. And this is really dangerous and worrying to someone like me coming from my background, because that means that across the board, and you think about how many platforms we have now and banks and all of this kind of stuff, 65% of people using the same password for multiple accounts. It's really scary. It means that we're not practicing good digital hygiene, which makes it difficult for us to talk about this with our children. Some examples of the most common passwords out there. I hope that nobody's using these, but I have a feeling that somebody might well be. But things like 1234561, 123456789, picture one, and then the word password. You can see on there how many people use it, how long it takes to crack it, and how many times it has been exposed. This is really important because it's a simple concept that we can have really open conversations with our children about, in terms of why it's so important to protect our platforms and so forth, and how it's so easy when we don't think about this for people to get information about us, to take our identity, to target us from a grooming perspective, to extort, hold to ransom. These kind of things all stem from the ability to take information from us. So we want to talk about digital hygiene. We want to talk about passwords as the initial starting point, if you like, across the board. This is an example of what a secure password looks like. You're going to say, yeah, well, how on earth am I going to remember that? And of course, that's the point. You're not supposed to be able to remember that, because if you can't remember it off the top of your head, it's highly unlikely that somebody else is going to be able to guess it. I'm going to come to this in a minute. We also want to look at sites like this. It's called Have I Been Pooned? And it's a way for you to find out whether or not your email addresses have been shared in a data breach. And so it's really helpful to understand, okay, my email has been shared in the data breach. I need to change the passwords on that email, because otherwise there is a potential threat there. Information about me can be taken without my consent. People can hack into certain things. Again, it's this basic primary level for us to start talking to our children about the whole digital landscape by focusing on something really simple like a password. Other things that we can do: two-step verification across all platforms. And I know it's inconvenient because then you have to wait for an OTP to come through on your password. But when we talk to students, we talk about this as well. That makes it difficult for people to take your information and access your platforms. If you share your password with people, they can go onto your platforms and pretend to be you. And then you are responsible for the outcomes of those scenarios. Use a password manager. The reason why we recommended these kind of passwords that you can't remember is because we can use something like LastPass or one password. And these are systems that remember all of the passwords that they set up. They set them up as safe, secure passwords, and you only have to remember one master password. Again, it's something that you have to remember. I know this from personal experience, because they, as the password manager solution, they don't know your password. They genuinely don't. So if you forget your master password, it can be a really big deal. So pick a strong master password, and then the rest can be managed by a software. Check the Have I Been Pwned website. See if your data has been leaked through your through your email. And this is the start of practicing good personal digital hygiene. And it's the starting point for us to talk about this entire situation with our children. We can introduce it through something simple like password creation, and it leads into so many of the other areas that we've covered off today when it comes to keeping our children safer in the online world. How else do we do it? Well, what we can do is we can start to focus on the positive content. We can start to focus on the positive outcomes that we see in the digital space. There are lots of them, and we want to start to show our children how other people are doing stuff in the online space. Now, I'm very conscious of time, and also there's a video that I want to show you, but without sound, it doesn't make much sense. But the video is actually from an organization in the UK called Digital Awareness. And this video I do show, and we'll circulate it through the school afterwards so that you can actually watch it. And it's the account of 3 young people who have had issues with social media, what those issues were, and how they've overcome them, and are going on to do great things. One of them is a musician now. One of them is going to university to be a coder, one of the most prestigious universities out there. And another one is utilizing it to incentivize herself to be healthy and have a good relationship with the technology. Really useful tool to show, and I'll be utilizing this video when I'm talking to students as well, to show how it's not unique to them. There's lots of people having issues, but there are ways to overcome those issues and to use those very same tools that might have been causing them issues to do some really great things out there. Another example that I have, a personal example, this is a young girl called Kekishan. I met her when she was about 12 years old. She's now graduated from university, but she suffered greatly from cyberbullying. She went to school here in the UAE. It was Dira International School that she was a student at. She was cyberbullied from around 8 years old, and you might say, well, what's she doing online? It was she started having the idea about a business that she wanted to set up, and so she did. She went and she created an organization called Green Hope, and it's a youth-led global social innovation enterprise, and it helps young people around the world to focus on sustainability, environmental protection, children's rights and peace. And so she started this when she was between 8 and 10 years old. She got a lot of cyberbullying threats. She got death threats to her and her mum online from a cyberbullying perspective, trying to tear her down because she was doing something pretty impressive in the online space. But as a family, they managed to get through it. She still manages and runs Green Hope. She went on during the COVID period to be on multiple platforms as an expert around this. She presented, again, on the very same platforms that she received a lot of digital hate on, using them for good, going out there and speaking about her message, sharing the stage with luminaries and ex-prime ministers and leaders from around the world, talking about a subject that she's exceptionally passionate about, and was recently mentioned as one of the top 30 under 30 sustainability leaders of Canada, where she's just graduated from university. So again, amazingly positive use of the very same tools that in some cases our children are either on or wasting time on. So we just need to have that shift in narrative to help them understand what's going on. And the final one there, a young man that I met a little while ago, at 9 years old, he wrote a book. He's a published author. He's 10 now. And he wrote it with the help of his mum and dad. And the reason that he wrote this book was because of all the negative he saw in the online space. That was the catalyst for him writing this. And again, he wrote it. He has based the main character around himself. And it's all about this idea of a second chance. He sees something going on, decides to do nothing about it. This is a subject we talk to the students about, bystanding behavior versus upstanding. He is a bystander and he gets the chance to be an upstander, and his story is all around that. It's on Amazon. He's leveraging the platforms that are out there. It's being sold. For every book that's sold, he donates some of that money to 2 young boys in Malawi that he met when he was on holiday, to help them with their education and to play football. He's passionate about football, and that's where they. So again, incredibly inspiring, really positive use of the very same technology that's available to all of our children. And we want to talk about this more often as we are establishing these communication channels with our children and keeping them open. This is our golden rule as Beat the Cyberbully. It's one I share with all the children and students I talk with, and it's one for us as well. Generate positive content. If we start to do that, they follow and copy what we do. If we engage in negative, if we're rude to people in the online space, I mean, this applies to the offline space as well. But if we are positive and we are thinking about how we communicate in the digital space, we are modeling appropriate behavior for our children. We need to think about taking control of overwhelm. They've got a lot going on, again, depending on the age of your children. They could be going through the physiological changes through puberty. They're going through establishing who they are in this world and what they do and where they fit. Then they've got this added layer of social media on top of it. Is a lot for them to deal with. As we said, not physiologically developed enough to deal with it on their own. So if we can take some of that from them, then that could be extremely helpful. We can adopt the they teach us, we guide them philosophy. So they know the technology, they know what and how. They don't necessarily understand the impact of some of the things that they're doing. And that's where we can guide them with our experience as mums and dads and as people that have lived a little bit and understand that, yes, this is a different vehicle, but the outcomes are often the same of how it can potentially come to life in the real world. We can listen, and this is very, very difficult, but so important for us as mums and dads. Sometimes our children just want a safe space to vent. They don't want us to fix it. They don't want us to do anything except listen. And we have to start to get better at that from a parental perspective of saying, okay, here is a safe space. The floor is open, talk. And they can talk to us about anything. And this is something that's taken from Kevin Hart. He created this, his own house, 1 hour, where any topic is out. There's no limits. Everything is you can talk about. You won't be punished. You can use language that you're not allowed to use normally, and any topic is open for discussion. There's no judgment. There's no punishment. And if you provide this space for our children, initially it's weird because we might not have done that, and then they think, okay, well, I might start talking about some of the smaller things, and as they get more comfortable talking about these, then when the big things go wrong, they know that we are there. But we have to listen, and we have to get better at asking them and saying, look, do you want to do something about this right now? And they might say no. And then we have to, in some cases, respect that, because jumping in and saying, right, let's go, we're going to go and speak to so-and-so and we're going to sort this out, that's not always what's needed when it comes to this kind of situation. So listening is something that we as mums and dads, again, include myself in this, we need to practice, and we need to keep up to date with what's going on so that we can keep up to what's going on. They will adapt to the new technology, jump on it and get into it. They won't understand some of the implications of what they're doing. And that's where we can get into this as a family. Be part of the conversation, stay informed, and get involved. If we are part of the conversation and we are informed, then we can be involved in their digital life. Not even just their digital life, their overall life, because digital and offline are becoming more and more intertwined, and they're only going to get more intertwined as we move forwards. So if we can be informed, we can be part of the conversation on their terms to a certain extent, talking a language that they understand, then that positions us as mum and dad as a resource for them to come to when, and I say when on purpose, it goes wrong online, because it will, just by definition of how long they're spending on there, regardless of their age, it's going to go wrong. And we want them to understand that they can come to us and talk about it, that they'll have a safe space to talk about it, that in most cases, initially, there won't be punishment or judgment. There will just be, okay, what we do about this, then we can open communication channels and we can keep them open so that when things continue to go wrong, we're actually talking about this particular subject. In our opinion, with Beat the Cyberbully, this open communication between us and our children is the only way to start bringing some of these topics that we've talked about today, which are uncomfortable, unpleasant, but are happening. And we need to open that topic so that they can understand why we want to put certain things in place, why there needs to be parameters around how we use the internet and when they're going to get access to it and for how long. And it's not just us being mum and dad and being killjoys and just saying, we've got to do it because I said so. We need to be able to tell them and explain to them why and what's going on. Feel free to connect with me. Any questions, beatthecyberbully.ae is the website. Safe at Beat the Cyberbully is my email address, and at Cybersafety UAE is the socials. So please do follow us on social. We are sharing a lot of information on there, and I really appreciate you today. Thanks very much for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Barry. Some of that will have been absolutely terrifying for some of our, parents of younger children. I'm sure, as a mum of both, I've got a Gen Z and a Generation Alpha child at school. I feel both sides of this as well. But I do think the key word, hearing all this is about empowerment for our parents to know what the dangers are, to know what might be coming up, and to really think about what they can do to prevent these situations from happening. And I really love the way, I know we had a talk before about, you are there as well as a source of support. If parents have questions, you're in this for, our children, to protect our children. And if there are situations that parents are unsure about how to lock down their own, I don't know what to say, networks or devices, then you're happy to help with that as well, which is amazing. Just a couple of things. We have had some questions through. I know we're really running out of time.
I know,
What would you say to a parent? We had a parent ask, at what age would you let the children be unsupervised on their devices?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Unsupervised is one of those questions that comes along a lot of the time. And my answer to that question is that in an ideal world, you will leave it as late as possible to allow them unsupervised access to their iPad or their phone or whatever it is from that side of things. The other side of that is that all of the platforms that are out there that our children want to spend time on in the App Store, they have an age limit warning on them. And that age limit warning is 13 years old. So we often say, in line with that at 13, assuming that prior to 13, we've had these conversations, we've been doing a lot of this, we've been talking about it. At that point, if you feel comfortable, then they can have access to their devices unsupervised. But again, it's one of those objective and subjective questions, because it depends on your child. It depends on, you could put 17, 13-year-olds in a room and there's 17 very, very different 13-year-olds in front of you. And so it's very much dependent on where they are themselves and how comfortable you feel with that. But as a gauge, if you like, that 13-year-old, that line, if you like, that the apps also utilize, it's a good one to go by.
Perfect, thank you. And we've also made available to all of our parents the National Online Safety courses. So as a school, we buy into that programme. We are a National Online Safety school. All of our teachers have undertaken appropriate training online. And also that, as I've said, if there are parents out there who have questions, who want to know more, I'd never seen any of those apps that you showed. I didn't recognize any of them, and that's terrifying to me. I thought I knew what I was talking about. So some of our parents who said the same, please don't feel that you're out of the game, because actually, it changes all the time. And I think it's us keeping up to date without necessarily the fear that it is just a bad place, but knowing what's going on is so important. Have you, the NOS do that? Is there any other websites you can think of where we can keep up to date with what these apps are? This yik yak sounds terrifying. Like, how would we know what's happening?
Yeah, so it can be terrifying. I used to start my sessions with saying, I'm not here to alarm you, I'm here to alert you, but you might leave a little alarmed. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that's a change of state, and that usually means where you will take action. So there's a couple of places. I mean, the NSPCC from the UK perspective is a very good resource. Common Sense Media from the US is also an incredible resource that's out there. NOS, is a brilliant resource that Cranleigh is obviously utilizing. They have some really good content out there that keeps you up to date. Common Sense is probably the most well-funded out of the US, and so they have resources. So they review apps, they review films, they review games, they review all of this stuff and give you the ins and outs from a parent's perspective, but also from a child perspective. So you get these two viewpoints. So you say, well, a 13-year-old thinks it's okay, or a 13-year-old is actually saying, I wouldn't let my 13-year-old on this. You think, okay, that's good information from that. So those are good ones. And then just on your point there, obviously I'm based here in the we do offer private one-on-one sessions as well through Zoom, so that if there's some specific situations going on in a family that you don't want to talk about in the public space, that we can do those 45-minute sessions, that we can get into the ins and outs of whatever's happening within your family unit you want to talk about. So those are the ones that I would probably start with, and then if people have got additional questions, then they can either come through yourself, Liz, or drop me a line and or ping us on social media, and usually you'll hear back from us, because it's me. So you will hear back. It'll just be when I get to the emails onto the socials from that side of things.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. And again, just to end with that final message, we're in this together as parents. We're here as a school to help. If parents do have any concerns or they need any extra help, you can always reach out to us as well. And I will pop some of those links into the newsletter this week, just so we've got them there as well, so that parents can refer to them. Thank you so much for your time. I know we'll see you again because you're popping into some of our assemblies. So thank you for that. And I hope, again, if we do have any parents with questions, please send me an email. Let's look towards, getting Barry back in again at some point in the future and dealing with, some of the more specific issues that we might have. So thank you to listening. For all of you listening to this, thank you to the CCC for allowing this to take place today, and have a lovely rest of the day.